Greetings, friends. You're on Ruslan Belov's channel, and today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of August 13th, 2025. A lot of very interesting events have taken place today, so let's dive in. We'll start, or rather continue, with the Pokrovsk direction, or perhaps already the Dobropilya direction, where the armed forces of the Russian Federation are continuing their offensive. If we look at this section of the front, we've once again received a significant number of geolocations. There are adjustments to the front line, there are significant updates, and so on and so forth. But I'd like to draw your attention to one very important nuance, which it seems will largely determine the further development of the situation in this area. I'd like to remind you once again that according to most mapping services and experts, information about the breakthrough of the front by Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups in this area began coming in on August 8th. We discussed this situation in detail yesterday, just briefly. And since August 8th, the map has been updated almost daily in favor of the Russian Federation's armed forces, and we even noted the fact that these updates were happening, to some extent, in a slight but geometric progression. Naturally, it was very interesting to understand and observe how long this Russian offensive, or the advance of sabotage and reconnaissance groups, could continue. And today, for the first time since August 8th, since the start of this offensive, or what some call a breakthrough, or even the collapse of the Ukrainian armed forces front, there has been no news whatsoever in the past 24 hours indicating that Russian saboteurs have advanced further. In other words, as you can see, the map, specifically the outer contour of the Russian breakthrough between August 12th and August 13, is almost unchanged. Only a few minor adjustments have been made, specifically in the area of Krasny Liman, in its southeastern part, where some sources report advances. There's also a slight update in the encirclement of the Ukrainian armed forces in the area of Kucharev Yar, as well as a minor clarification of the front line near Zoloty Kolodets. And that's it. In other words, there have been no further updates in the past 24 hours, no reliable evidence that Russian saboteurs have advanced further. Today, no one is adjusting the maps. This is very important because it gives us a broader understanding of what's happening here. However, despite the lack of adjustments to the map's outer contour, we're talking about the advance of sabotage and reconnaissance groups, and there are still some minor corrections. To be more precise, today the Russian Federation's Ministry of Defense reported that the settlements of Suvorova and Nikonorovka have been cleared by units of the Russian armed forces. On the map, these settlements are referred to as Zatishok and Zapovidne. So, we see a slight difference between the names of towns and villages used on Western maps and, let's say, maps with pro-Russian origins. Based on this report from the Russian Ministry of Defense, we're making corresponding updates to the east, or rather southeast, of Dobropilya. This is how the map looked in this area just yesterday. Let me remind you that yesterday the first footage of objective control appeared from the settlement of Suketska-Rodinska, showing Ukrainian artillery striking positions of the Russian armed forces in both settlements. And today, we're making updates based on the Ministry of Defense's report. No objective control footage confirming this advance has been published yet, but this is the situation overall. Still, there's a slight adjustment to the map, and for now, although the pace is slow and not very significant, some offensive momentum is being maintained east of Shakov, Toretsk, Sofievka, and Volodymyrivka. We're talking about the area between Popiv Yar, Poltavka, Rusin Yar, and so on. Here, the map is being adjusted in small increments almost every day, and these small pieces are being updated daily, starting from August 8th. In other words, the offensive continues here. It's not moving at the same rapid pace as, say, slightly to the west in the area of Rodinske or Belitske, but in principle, these two offensives are pursuing the same goal, albeit executed in completely different ways. Let me remind you that at the moment, as we've previously discussed, the main task of the Russian armed forces units is to reduce the distance between the reconnaissance groups, or sabotage and reconnaissance groups, which it seems effectively control the entire breakthrough line, and to maintain this distance between these units and the regular Russian armed forces, which are gradually moving and advancing through this territory, clearing one settlement after another. And most likely, this is the answer to the question of why there are no updates to the outer perimeter. the contour of the sabotage and reconnaissance group's operations today. The distance is already too great, too significant. For clarity, we can even calculate it. The distance between the confirmed geolocated positions of, say, the Russian Federation's armed forces yesterday near the settlement of Mayak and, for example, near the settlements of Petrivka and Novovodyen is 20 kilometers. This is already too far from the main line, and of course it may not have made sense to advance further, especially since, let me remind you, just yesterday information came in that the Ukrainian command decided to deploy the 1st Army Corps to this sector. This may also be a reason why the Russian army has slightly paused, just slightly. At the same time, we must clearly understand that over the past few days, the Russian army has achieved a significant breakthrough and progress, and all these territories now need to be cleared. This is exactly what Russian units are doing. For example, some cartographers and experts have calculated the total area of these territories marked on various mapping services, and according to available information, in just the last 24-48 hours, the Russian army, or rather saboteurs, have advanced and taken some control over areas ranging from 157 square kilometers to 200. These are vast territories that need to be cleared. There is undoubtedly pockets of resistance from the Ukrainian armed forces in these areas, and advancing further may no longer be possible. These territories need to be secured. But returning to the settlements of Volodymyrivka, Shakov, Sofiivka and Toretsk, it seems that the main units being redeployed here are from the Ukrainian 1st Army Corps. Moving further west toward Dobropilya, toward the settlements of Belitske and Bilozerska, is not feasible until this pocket is either eliminated or at least neutralized, as there is a very narrow bottleneck in the form of Novotoretske, Fedorivka, and so on. If the Ukrainian side deploys enough units there and conducts successful counterattacks with whatever forces they may still have, this could lead to very unpleasant consequences. However, based on the information currently coming from open sources, the Ukrainian armed forces continue to amass their units along the state border with Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions. This suggests that Ukraine lacks the forces and resources to stabilize the situation in Pokrovsk. Or rather, there may be some resources for stabilization, but definitely not for counterattacks. To conduct counterattacks, they would need to withdraw all units from the border with Bryansk, Kursk, and Sumy regions and redeploy them to this sector. Once again, today can be described as a kind of calm before the storm. The Russian army is undergoing a massive regrouping, pulling in units, possibly even mechanized ones. Zelensky and other pro-Western experts are saying that tomorrow and the day after, Thursday and Friday, will be the most intense and significant days in terms of offensive operations. Most likely tomorrow, after a brief regrouping happening today, the Russian army will resume its offensive actions to maximally strengthen the positions of Russian Federation President Vladimir Putin ahead of the summit scheduled to take place in Alaska this Friday. Therefore, tomorrow, we are likely to receive a large number of geolocations from this sector, and not only from this one, but others as well. If we talk about the southwestern part, information is already coming in about the designation of a final evacuation of Ukrainian civilians from the Pokrovsk and Pokrovsk agglomeration areas. Families, especially children, are being evacuated, and evacuation has been announced not only in the Pokrovsk agglomeration, but also further northwest in the Donetsk region, towards settlements like Oleksandrivka and so on. According to pro-Ukrainian sources and information available from open sources, this part of the Donetsk region is already being evacuated. This primarily indicates that Ukrainian intelligence likely has enough information to conclude that there is a high probability that the Russian army could reach this small area located in the northwestern part of the Donetsk region. Well, we'll keep observing how events unfold in this sector. Next, we move to the Kostiantynivka sector, where a lot of interesting news is also coming in. Let's start with the Kleban-Byk reservoir. The Russian army, it seems, is moving toward a decisive assault, entering the final stage, the final phase of combat operations. In the southeast of the Kleban-Byk reservoir, over the past 24 hours, a large number of materials have been published showing artillery strikes, FPV drone attacks, and a significant amount of video footage where we can see Ukrainian soldiers, possibly assault troops or territorial defense, gradually withdrawing in pairs or threes further north to an evacuation point. In other words, the front line and the entire bridgehead here are exhausted. There is clearly a lack of forces on the Ukrainian side to hold this direction, and in the near future, likely tomorrow or the day after, just before the Alaska summit, the Russian army may consolidate its hold on both settlements, and corresponding map updates will be made. Very interesting information is coming in from just east of Kostiantynivka. Neutral cartographers report that the Russian armed forces have also managed to break through the defense line east of the settlement of Kostiantynivka, along the perimeter of a village called Predtekin. The map looked like this as of the end of August 12, 2025. Today, it looks like this. According to various experts, the Russian army has taken control of most strongpoints, and currently there are no significant strongpoints between the Russian army's positions and the settlement of Kostiantynivka that could stop or slow their advance. Moreover, some experts report that Russian units have already entered the territory of Kostiantynivka's Dashas, and it seems urban combat has begun. Well, we'll keep watching how this story unfolds, but it looks like we're in for some very interesting and intense days ahead. Next, we move to the South Donetsk direction, where Russian units are gradually advancing along the perimeter. However, in this sector of the front, the Russian army is not rushing to push deep into the Dnipropetrovsk region. This is likely a result of possible agreements between the Russian and American administrations regarding a peaceful resolution, according to which, let me remind you, all territories in the Dnipropetrovsk region are to be returned to Ukraine in the event of a peaceful settlement. Therefore, there doesn't seem to be any point for the Russian Federation to advance into this region yet. The picture may become clearer after August 15th, when it becomes more apparent what terms, if any, the US and Russian presidents have agreed upon regarding a peaceful resolution of the conflict in Ukraine. And that's all, dear friends. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, give your likes, and all the best to you.